Welcome to Old Economy Village's presentation about the Articles of Agreement of 1805. We chose to do this now because of the February 15th anniversary of the Harmony Society. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sarah Buffington, and David Miller, our educator, is also going to be presenting as well. We're going to have time at the end of this presentation for questions and discussion. You can also ask questions in the chat box if you want to. All right, so the Articles of Agreement, also known as the Articles of Association, are the legal document for the Harmony Society. The Harmony Society also had a religious document of sorts. It's the religious foundation for what they believed. According to Harmonist trustee Jacob Henrici, the Harmony Society was founded according to the example of the first Christian congregation in Jerusalem on the basis of complete common ownership of property, according to Acts 2 and 4. So these are on your screen. Basically, it's saying that everything is held in common. They sold all of their possessions and goods and parted them to all men. And the multitude of them that believed were of one heart and one soul. Neither said any of them that aught of the things which he possessed was his own, but they had all things common. Neither was there any among them that lacked, for as many as were possessors of land or houses sold them, and brought the prices of the things that were sold, and laid them down at the apostles' feet, and distribution was made unto every man according as he had need. So David Miller, the educator, he's going to talk about the actual Articles of Agreement. So I'm going to give it to David.
So maybe you all read this. I'm not going to read it word for word. I'm just going to kind of give you a synopsis of what is in the articles. There's a total of 6 articles. This is the version from 1805, and it starts out firstly. When it's rewritten, it would become known as Article 1. And it basically deals with the ownership of property, that anybody who wants to become a member can, but they have to forfeit all their property, whether it be land or cattle or anything, to the society. And the other important point is that if they choose to, if they pass away while they're in the society, their heirs can't make any claim to that property. It will simply belong to the Harmony Society. So go ahead, Sarah, and give me the second slide, which starts out secondly, and that will eventually become Article 2 of the Articles. And it deals with obedience to the society, that all members need to submit faithfully to the society and follow the regulations of the community, and that members and their family members all have to work for the society. If I can have the next slide, which starts out thirdly, and that will become eventually Article 3, and that deals with the terms of withdrawal. And so members had to agree that they would not, if they chose to leave, they would not be compensated for their labor and wages, that all the work that they did, if they belonged to the society for 10 years, they cannot be paid for that service. It all was considered to be voluntary work for the betterment of the brethren. Okay, Sarah, if you want to go to the next one. And so this one starts out on the other hand, and it eventually will become Article 4. And it deals with membership privileges. So members had the privilege of attending all church services and religious meetings, and they also would be instructed through attending church and could attend school. And the next slide, which starts out secondly, but when the articles are rewritten, this will become Article 5. And it also deals with membership privileges. And it basically states that if you become a member of the society, they're going to take care of all your needs. That's going to include lodging, food, drink, clothing. When you were sick, you could visit the doctor, you could be given medicine. And if it got so bad that you were just simply unfit to labor, they would take care of you for the rest, for the rest of your life. If a father or mother died while in the community or chose to leave, the remaining family members would be taken care of by the Harmony Society. And the next slide, which starts out thirdly, this eventually would be Article 6. And this article deals with what happens when somebody withdraws from the society. So it deals with the refund of property. If somebody was a property owner, say they owned 200 acres of property, that would be given over to the Harmony Society. And if that person chose to leave, well, the Harmony Society already had sold that, but whatever the value of that 200 acres would be, they would get that value, but no interest. If it was a sizable amount of money, the Harmonists didn't have to pay it all in one lump sum. They had the option of maybe spreading payments over like 2 or even 3 payments if it was a lot of money. Now, some people joined the society and they weren't property owners, but so they weren't going to receive any big amount of money, but they would be given, if they chose to leave, they would be given a donation by the society. And that could be different for different individuals. That donation all kind of is based upon how long they lived in the society, what all they did work-wise while they were here. And it varied from case to case. And it was also based on their conduct, if they were good members. So I'm going to hand it back to Sarah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, David. So the Articles of Agreement that we have now, the 1805 Articles of Agreement, actually aren't believed to be the original 1805 Articles of Agreement. There was a court, or not actually a court case, it was a case in 1807 that the Harmony Society was trying to become incorporated, and they petitioned the House of Representatives in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that year to become incorporated. So in the journal for the House of Representatives, there's an excerpt of the Articles of Agreement, and it is not the same one that we have. The one we have in the archives is all in German. We don't have an original English version of it that I know of. And this one is in English, and it's not the same. So, so to tell you a little bit about this, this case, Jacob Meckling was from Beaver County, and he was part of this committee for the incorporation request in Harrisburg. He knew the Harmony Society well, and he knew that they were religiously intolerant, and they had great zeal for their religion. And many people left the Harmony Society before 1807. They just didn't want to be a part of it. They sued in 1806 and 1807 to get their money back. The committee knew about the 7 court cases that happened with the Harmony Society, and they used this knowledge for their decision. They unanimously decided not to grant incorporation to the Harmony Society because everyone in America had a constitutional right saying that all men are born equally free and independent and have certain inherent and indefeasible rights, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, and acquiring, possessing, and protecting property and reputation, and of pursuing their own happiness. So the Harmony Society sought asylum in America from the iron grasp of tyranny which pervaded Europe. The committee felt that the establishment of the Harmony Society might actually lead to equally oppressive and dangerous consequences, and sanction an attempt to undermine and destroy these fundamental principles of free government, which have conspicuously distinguished us from all the nations of the earth. So here on this slide, there's the wording of the original 1805 articles that's found in that House journal. So the big thing that you see here is that no claim on no individual or individuals of the society shall hold or possess in their individual capacity either real or personal property, but each and every one renouncing and disclaiming all property whatsoever, vested in the common stock for the use of the society. And in case any member of the society should quit the society, he shall have no claim on the society for money or property, but shall leave all to the discretion of a majority of the society, who alone shall determine whether anything and how much he shall have. So the big difference between that original one and the rewritten one is that with the rewritten one, the one we have in the archive, you could get back the property you brought to the Harmony Society without interest. And if you were poor or brought nothing to the society with you when you joined, you could receive a donation of cash as long as you were someone that was acting well. So we have not yet found a copy of the original Articles of Agreement. So this is the closest we've really come to seeing the original articles. And David's actually going to talk to you a little bit about that controversy. So I'm going to hand it back over to David.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So historian Carl Arndt really does not believe that what we have in our archives was actually written in the year 1805. And he believes that they were written sometime after 1808. And his reasoning behind that is that some of the court cases that occurred in 1806 and 1807 did not include the Articles of Agreement. So that's kind of his basis, that they would have probably been used in a court of law if they actually existed. And he thinks that that document may have not even been written until sometime after 1812. And the reason behind that is that when you look at the signatures, George Rapp is one of the first people to sign. And then shortly thereafter, you see Frederick Rapp's name. Now, Frederick was the adopted son of George, but there's a very important signature missing. And that was the signature of his biological son, George's biological son, Johannes. Johannes actually accompanied George in 1803 to the United States when they were in search of land. So, he was in the United States early on, was living in the town of Harmony. He was trained as a surveyor, probably helped lay out the town, but yet his signature isn't there. In 1812, Johannes was severely injured in a milling accident, and he actually died because of his injuries. So Carl Arndt believes that Johannes's signature isn't there because there's a real good chance that what we have in our archives was those names and stuff were added probably sometime after 1812. Arndt also sees some discrepancies as he looks over the signatures. For example, not all harmonists could read or write. So if somebody couldn't really write their name and needed to sign a document, somebody else would write that person's name, and then that man or woman would make their mark next to it. And that does not appear within the 1805 articles. The other thing is that there's some signatures that look very similar, as if maybe the same person is writing down different names. And then along those lines, trustee John Duss wrote notes in that document and would, next to certain names, would notate, well, this person wasn't a Harmonist in 1805. They joined later on, but yet that name appears as if they had signed in the year 1805. In the same book, um, after the 1805 signatures, the next signature that shows up is Jacob Kurtz on page 14, and that was signed on February the 15th of 1816. And from then on, things seem to fall in place. So it's very plausible that that document all was kind of put together, kind of like backdated, if you will, in 1816. Now, when you look at this slide that's up on the screen, you can see 15 different dates there. And they're all years in which the articles were redone. And just to kind of paint some broad brushstrokes here, I will go into each year, but just keep in mind, whenever something important took place, they felt they needed to redo the articles. So if there would be a large group of people who are trying to join the society, they would go ahead and kind of like redo the articles. If some significant people were leaving society, they might do the same thing. And then obviously, whenever a death occurred within the leadership of the Harmonist Society, they also felt that it was important to redo the articles. So we've been talking about 1805. So let's now move to 1818. And the significance of that year was that 50 people decided to join the Harmony Society. So there really wasn't any change to the wording, but since 50 people were going to join, they were going to redo the Articles of Agreement. In 1821, the only real difference to the wording is that they added that people would be okay with receiving a gift when they left the Harmony Society, a gift of money. And the book was signed by companies or groups. By that time, the Harmonists did decide to kind of organize the community in different companies or groups, and they all kind of signed as a block. At least that's my understanding. In 1827, something kind of significant happened. 615 people signed the articles, but 42 did not. So they were going to withdraw. And out of those 42 people, 8 of those people decided to form a group called the Society of United Germans. And they were going to establish their own communal society in Eastern Ohio and call it Teutonia. 2 of the kind of ringleaders of this group was Peter Kaufman and Jacob Schreiber. And Peter Kaufman didn't want to be too much of a troublemaker. He was just kind of okay with leaving, but Jacob Schreiber was not a real happy camper about his experience with the Harmony Society. You know, basically these men kind of enjoyed living in a communal society, but they did want to be able to marry and have children. So, you know, that was important to them. And so Jacob Schreiber decided to actually approach the Pennsylvania legislature and you know, mention some of the things that he thought was kind of scandalous or bad about the society. And so the Harmonists reached out to some legal counsel. They had a friend in Pittsburgh who was born in Prussia that immigrated to the United States, and his name was Charles von Bonhurst. And so Charles went before the Pennsylvania legislature, and he exalted the praises of the Harmony Society and was able to kind of smooth things over. But kind of in the meantime, Bonhurst is like pleading and urging to the Harmonists to like give him an English copy of the Articles of Agreement, because it would make things a lot easier if he had that. So then we have 1834, and that is the year that Frederick Rapp died. And so the articles were redone to appoint somebody to more or less take Frederick's place. George Rapp was the overall leader of the Harmony Society, but he specialized as the spiritual leader. Frederick Rapp's role was he was in charge of the business end of things, and George didn't want to have to deal with that. In fact, George thought it might be helpful to have two people do that. So R.L. Baker, the storekeeper, and Jacob Henrici became trustees, or they were in charge of doing what Frederick had done. So in 1836, there is a major change made. Article 6 is abolished, and that is the article that dealt with people's property. So now in 1836, if you sign that document and say you had a 200-acre farm that was worth all this money, and you decide to withdraw, you aren't getting any money for that. You're still given a parting donation, which might be $100 or $200, whatever they saw fit, but you are not going to be compensated for the property that you once owned. Then in 1841, the articles mentioned that some siblings, Johann Gottlieb Muntz and Louisa Frederica Muntz, would be admitted, but on probation to the Harmony Society, because their mother, Katharina Muntz, and their stepfather, Daniel Reichardt, who is the younger brother of Frederick, were often thrown out of the society because of their behavior. And that mainly was drunkenness. So they'd get kicked out and feel sorry about it, and they'd be left back in, and this happened from time to time. In 1847, that is the year that George Rapp died. So the articles established a board of elders, which consisted of 9 members. And of those 9 members, 2 of those elders would become a board of trustees. There would be a senior trustee and a junior trustee. And at that time, R.L. Baker became the senior trustee. He was now the overall person in charge of the Harmony Society. And then his right-hand man was Jacob Henrici. So in 1868, R.L. Baker dies, and now Jacob Henrici is going to become the senior trustee. In 1879, there were more Harmonists joined at that time. And just to kind of mention about what all was involved with this, a Harmonist would actually read the Articles of Agreement to make sure that everybody heard them and understood them. So the articles would be read, and then if people were agreeable, they then would sign their names. In 1890, that's the year Jonathan Lenz died. Jonathan Lenz was a junior trustee, and so the 1890 articles established Ernest Wolfel as the new junior trustee of the society. Ernest actually dies in July of 1890, and so the articles were redone again, and then John Duss becomes the junior trustee. Moving on to 1892, on Christmas Day, that is when Jacob Henrici died, and then John Duss becomes the senior trustee, and Samuel Sider becomes the junior trustee. In 1893, Samuel Cyber decides to resign, and so Gottlieb Reifmuller becomes the junior trustee. And Rothmuller dies in 1897. So at that time, the articles were redone, and this is kind of significant because John Dust becomes the sole trustee of the Harmony Society at that time. There is no junior trustee. And then in 1903, John Dust decides to pursue a musical career. So he resigns from the Harmony Society and appoints his wife, Susanna Dust, who becomes the sole trustee of the Harmony Society. So that's kind of a little summary of what happened each of those years. And I'll hand it back over to Sarah.
Thanks, David. So there's a lot of talk about the Harmonist leaders, and there's some that a lot of people never hear about. So you always hear about George Rapp and Frederick Rapp. George being the founder of the Harmony Society, and Frederick was his right-hand man. And George adopted Frederick, of course, on the way over from Germany to America. So George died in 1847, and a lot of people thought that the Harmony Society was going to end then. But the Harmonists that were left made sure that it didn't happen. So they renewed everything with the new Articles of Association and formed a new type of leadership. So I should back up a little bit, though. In 1834, when Frederick Rapp died, Frederick was in charge of all of the business affairs of the Harmony Society, and George didn't know how to take care of that as well. And so he was put in charge of all of that. But he then quickly, as soon as he was put in charge of that, he made R.L. Baker and Jacob Henrici in charge of the external affairs of the society, all the business affairs. But they weren't yet trustees, and that didn't happen yet until George died in 1847. So then R.L. Baker became the head trustee, and Jacob Henrici became the junior trustee. And it was that way until 1868, when R.L. Baker died in, I believe it was January or February of 1868. So then, now what? Jonathan Lentz. Jonathan Lentz was a member. He was born into the Harmony Society in the early 1800s and in Harmony. And he worked in carriage making, and he was just a really strong worker. He was also one of the people put in charge at the Economy Oil Company up in Tidioute. So he worked up there. And so they really thought highly of him. So they put him in charge of the junior trusteeship. But also at the same time, there was a board of elders. And a lot of people don't know that. They just think of the trustees if they know about the Harmony Society. The board of elders was established at the same time as the board of trustees. And that was 9 people in the Harmony Society that would take care of all the internal affairs. So they oversaw all of the people who were supervising factories and the fields and all the different industries. And the trustees, the 2 trustees, were also elders, but the trustees were the ones that were in charge of the external affairs of the society. So it was a nice separation of duties there. So, okay, so in 1890, a lot of people were dying. 1889, right at the end of the year, Gertrude Rapp died. That was the granddaughter of George Rapp. Jonathan Lentz died a few days later. The one that they were grooming to become trustee was George Kirschbaum. He died of a gas explosion. And so now all of a sudden, all these people are dying. Everyone's getting older in the society, and they just, who are we going to put in charge? We have to have someone. So they got Ernest Wolfel, and he was admitted in 1879, and he was a boss of the wine vaults and cellars, and he was a cooper. But unfortunately, he died also that year in July of 1890. So he was the junior trustee for 6 months, and then he died. Well, then in steps the infamous John Duss, and he becomes the junior trustee for the Harmony Society with Jacob Henry C. as the senior trustee. And then, there's a year and a half that they're together with everything. Jacob Henrici was getting older, and he died in 1892, leaving the office of trustee open again. And then they picked Samuel Sieber, to be the trustee. Well, Samuel's wife was having some troubles. People were talking about her, and they decided to leave the society. So they did in 1893, leaving it open again. So then in steps Gottlieb Riethmüller, and he was Caroline Duss's cousin. Caroline was John Duss's mother. So he was a tiller and a winemaker. I see a trend here. And he was there until February of 1897. He was 61 years old when he passed away. And that left it all open to John Duss being the sole trustee. And then his wife took over in 1903. And then the society, of course, closed in 1905. So a little overview. I'm going to hand it back over to David to talk about the Harmonist feast days and festivals.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So we have a slide here that shows some of the holy days and festivals that the Harmony Society had. They did celebrate Christmas. However, it wasn't necessarily a day off unless it was a Sunday. If it was another day of the week, they would work for a good portion of the day anyways, and have a feast in the feast hall later on. They celebrated Good Friday, they celebrated Easter, and they also celebrated Pentecost. So they were the holy days that they celebrated and observed. As far as festivals, February the 15th was very significant because that was in 1805 the day and year that the Harmony Society was incorporated or became a society. And since that was the anniversary of their founding, they wanted to remember that date, and they called that celebration Harmony Fest. There are a few exceptions that I've seen in my reading where if one of the prominent leaders of the Harmony Society was traveling and they weren't going to be at the town on February the 15th, but they were going to be coming back very shortly thereafter. The date sometimes did get postponed to include like a prominent member, but they always try to have it on February the 15th. They had a autumn event called Harvest Home, also known as Erntedankfest. Pre-COVID, we celebrate Erntedankfest here at Old Conley Village. More recently, we've been having it the first weekend in October, but they would have it really kind of late summer, early autumn. And then they had a love feast in October. And typically on holy days and festivals, the day would begin with members of the orchestra, or in later years, just the band, who played brass instruments, would get up early in the morning and they would climb the stairs of the church tower, and they would come out onto the balcony and they would start to play. And they would kind of awaken the town music to kind of set everybody in the mood. And then the big event would be a feast in the feast hall, which was prepared in the community kitchen next door. And the food could vary, but many times they had like a Harmonist stew. I mean, if you're trying to cook for almost 800 people, stew's the way to go. I've read some accounts that they maybe would roast an ox, and they would have bread, and they would have Harmonist wine at these events. Okay, Sarah.
Okay, so we're going to see a little video I put together about the Articles of Agreement, and but I want to tell you a little bit first about some name things that you might see, because there's a lot of this in there. Here's an example of two Harmonist names, this Georg Michael Diem and Maria Diem also. But you see there's an IN on her name. These two are brother and sister. And it's a tradition for the Germans to put an IN ending on a female name when they are kind of belonging to that person, that male person. You know, a lot of times, I guess today it would be the wife saying, "That's my husband right there." But this is a case of brother and sister. So they're saying, "I belong to him." It doesn't actually change the surname legally. Her name is still Maria Diem, but it's, you know, it's just an interesting little thing, and you'll see that in this video that we're going to play. So now we're going to have the floor open to discussion if you have any questions, but we can also talk about things after the video as well. The video's 12.5 minutes. So, and that is showing the original Articles of Agreement. So if you would like to chat, write in the chat box, we can do that way, or you can unmute and discuss. I'm going to stop sharing my screen if there's any questions.
Sarah,
Yes, Ruth Ann.
this book, which I see now, is edited by the man that was, Donald Pitzer.
Right.
But I found in it on page 135 that my great grandmother, who was a dissenter, when she left, she got $100.
Huh.
And her one son got $25 because he had worked 1 year. And another son got $75 because he had worked 2 years, 11 months. The other 3 children didn't get anything. But I knew I had that someplace when you were talking about reimbursement or giving them something. And he has put that together in this George Rapp's Disciples, book.
Right.
And I found it fascinating after your discussion about whether or not they get any, if they withdraw, whether they would get anything,
Right. So you wonder why the others didn't get anything too.
Exactly. But I figure they did.
Was it because they were children?
Yes, they didn't work, apparently. They were, let's see, well, they were 24 years old. They should have been working, but, so anyway, the other 3, yes, did not. 2 are late, girls, and I wondered if maybe the women didn't get one, but one was a son. So anyway, for those of you who have an interest, I recommend this book.
And also Eileen Aiken English, basically put that book and more into her demographic directory, which is right here. And I've used mine so much that it's fallen apart, so it's in a binder. But so that's a book that she refers to, that book that you were talking about, Ruth Ann.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I was just
Go ahead, Barb.
a comment about the feasts and festivals and the band music being so much a part of that. I was born in Northampton County and in Easton, and of course Bethlehem, Pennsylvania is about 10 miles away, and that's a Moravian center. And the Moravians, of course, have a great musical heritage as well. And I remember many times as a child, and I lived there until I went to college, so I was 17 or 18 when I left, that their brass band would come around the streets of Easton. There was a Moravian church in Easton, and play early Easter morning, beginning as early as 3 o'clock in the morning, that they would come around and play. So that was sort of, it evoked a childhood memory in talking about this brass band that played on the festivals, which I've seen from another German religious tradition.
Right. Okay, so we have some questions in the chat, and one from Gretchen says, in Harmony, you had buildings like the Bentel Sister duplex, which seems nicer in quality and style than other homes. Do we know anything about how decisions such as living conditions were made before later standardization in Indiana and economy? And that's actually something that I'm studying a lot about lately. It seems that the closer you were to George Rapp personally, the closer you lived to him. And if you brought money to the society, you lived closer to George Rapp. And you might have had a better house, although they were supposed to be all standardized. Also, if you were working in a certain trade, you would live close to where that trade happened. And it seems like, I don't know if it's the case in all of the communities or not, but it seems like the supervisor of that trade would have a brick house. So it's interesting. I hope that answers your question. And then Ken has a question. What exactly was the reason for the love feast? David, do you want to talk about that? I can talk about that too.
Well, I mean, I actually don't know why specifically they were going to be doing that in October. I mean, if you look at the calendar, things were going to be pretty heavy in the spring. The fact that they're celebrating like Good Friday and Easter and Pentecost, so they're going to be having a lot of gatherings during that time. And then, of course, the Unferdonk Fest would be late summer, real early fall. It seems that maybe just within the calendar year that possibly October would be a good time just to have the fellowship get together and have a meal communally. So that's just kind of an educated guess. And I'll see if Sarah has anything to add or.
I have more to add.
Okay.
So the love feast would happen whenever they needed it too. I don't know why that reference said it was in October especially, but whenever there was some hardship in the society, they would say, okay, let's all get together and have a love feast. And it was a time for reconciliation and brotherhood and all that. So it was a time for making up.
So they probably had such things then, you know, in the schism of 1832, that would have been a big hardship for the Harmonists, and that would be maybe a time of fellowship and of healing.
I've seen references to love feasts in the archives, but I haven't ever stopped to study when exactly they were, but they would mention when they had a love feast. And I don't know that all of the love feasts were written down, but you'll see them in music and in, I think in sermons, and I'm not sure, just in different places.
Sarah and David, I have a question for you.
Yes.
I know at some point they burned the book of gifts or the list that they had of what people brought into the society. did that coincide with one of the revisions to the articles?
I think so. Because they didn't want to give back whatever you got when you came into the society. You if we burn the book, then there's no record of it and no one knows what anyone brought, and it's all equal. Does that answer your question? Okay. Chris has a question. Wasn't there a 4th of July celebration? David, did you find?
Yes, they actually did celebrate the 4th of July. It kind of had a dual meaning for the Harmony Society, because it just so happened that it was July the 4th that one of the ships sailed into port with more harmonists from Germany. So that was something important to them. And also, this was their new adopted country. So they were happy to celebrate the 4th of July. I know when they were in New Harmony, they had like a big celebration. They invited all the people who lived in neighboring towns and in the area to come, and the Harmonists like fed them and provided like a music concert for them. Here in the town of Economy, they would celebrate. They'd have some of their friends, German friends from Pittsburgh, come up. I know that I had read that Charles Bonhurst helped celebrate one of the 4th of July's, and I don't know if he read the Declaration of Independence. I mean, it slips on my mind exactly what he did, but he actually was a part of a program that they had here in Economy. So that was a holiday that a secular holiday that they enjoyed.
Right. Speaking of 4th of July, I think it's interesting. It's a little side note that when they had the museum in the Natural History building, they had an organ that could play all different tunes and different types of instruments. Well, people thought that was so neat. One person said, "I'll trade you," I think it was 10 fireworks for that. I thought that was interesting. Barb has a question. How many left in the schism? And I don't remember exactly, but it's around 230 people left in the Great Schism of 1832. But there were other schisms throughout time. It was just that one was the largest one, and it was just about 1/3 of the society. Okay, are there any other questions before we start the video? Or any other comments? You can unmute or use the chat.
There's one more chat.
Oh, thank you. Ken asks, did the Harmonists celebrate Christmas on the 25th or earlier like they do in Germany? It's been really a debate. Did the Harmonists celebrate Christmas like that? Because we do have some business letters that are dated December 25th. So, it could have been just a business day like everything else. But we do have a book in the archives that's all about Christmas. We actually have 2 copies of it. One was one that Jacob Henrici brought with him from Germany. And we just don't know if they celebrated it at all. It's still a pretty early time when they came over for Christmas traditions. So it's just something that's not written about very much. So we really don't know what they did. So that's why when we're decorating for Christmas, sometimes I'll leave a room in the Rapp house empty of stuff, no decorations, because I said, well, this is how the Harmonists celebrated Christmas. So I don't know. Any other questions? All righty. Well, I am then going to share my screen again, and we're going to take a look at the Articles of Agreement video.
Christina Rappin, Rosina Rappin, Frederik Rapp, Friedrich Weingärtner, Christina Weingärtner, Jakob Weingärtner, Johannes Bommesberger, Friederika Bommesberger, Johannes Hörnle, Elisabetha Hörnlen, Jakob Zimmermann, Friedrich Eigner, Bara Eignerin, David Lenz, Christina Lenzen, Jakob Benzenhöfer, Katharina Benzenhöfer, Jakob Beker, Rosina Bekerin, Wilhelm Henger, Matthäus Speidel Alter, Margareta Speidelin, Rosina Hengerin, Margareta Rukenbroden, Jakob Wohlgemuth, Margareta Wohlgemutin, Peter Gutbrot, Christoph Viehmeier, Margareta Viehmeierin, Michael Viehmeier, Dietrich Fekenbusch, Johannes Blum, Daniel Dieterle, Alter Matthäus Reif, Anna Maria Reifen, Michael Fritz, Jakob Sander, Dieterich Knodel, Philly Fibena Knodelin, Agnes Krämerin, junger Jakob Ehmann, Juliana Ehmänen, Elisabetha Böhringerin, Eva Katharina Jordanen, Katharina Bekerin, Christina Büchenhofen, Christoph Diem, Margareta Diemen, Georg Michael Diem, Maria Diemen, Elisabetha Lautenschlägerin, Elisabetha Hörnlerin, Josua Weininger, Regina Weihingerin, Elisabetha Weihengerin, Elisabetha Immlerin, Georg Felte, Elisabetha Katharina Felten, Maria Elisabetha Felten, Euphina Felten, Christian Stark, Bernhard Durwächter, Katharina Dürrwächterin, Elisabetha Dürrwächterin, Christoph Lang, Dorothea Langen, Johann David Leuble, Anna Maria Leublin, Johannes Mutschler, Georg Fester, Margareta Fersterin, Anna Maria Fersterin, Tobias Haufler, Johann Christoph Müller, Regina Hauflerin, Jakob Braun, Christian Barschett, Katharina Barschettin, junger Christian Barschett, Christina Barschetting, Anna Maria Barschettin, Jakob Dürr, Jakob Kreil, François Blanc, Johannes Langenbacher, Katharina Langenbacherin, Michael Rückenbrot, Christina Rückenbroden, Georg Schüle, Agnes Schulen, Johann Georg Böhringer, Katharina Bohringerin, Johannes Böhringer, Christian Eigner, Magdalena Eignerin, Jung Matthäus Reif, Margareta Reifen, Christian Felte, Katharina Felten, Christian Österreicher, Johanna Österreicherin, Christoph Leicht, Dorothea Leuchten, Jakob Scholle, junge Scholle, Salome Schollen, Johann Konzelmann, Dorothea Konzelmännin, Michael Haufler, Dorothea Hauflerin, Johann Georg Schmidt, Friederika Schmieden, Michael Riesch, Jean Canel, Georg Knodel, Katharina Knodelin, Georg Knodel, Engelhard Autritt, Juliana Autritin, Alter Jakob Ehmann, Eva Ehmennen, Friedrich Eckensberger, Jakob Geiger, Elisabetha Geigerin, Paul Frank, Barbara Frankin, Friedrich Frank, Friedrich Henning, Friederika Henning, Josef Geiger, Christia Vogt, Anna-Katharina Geigerin, Katharina Vogtin, Ludwig Hagmeier, Michael Scharnbacher, Margareta Scharnbacherin, Christian Riesch, Katharina Riesch, Jakob Launer, Regina Launerin, Christoph Leucht, Matthäus Scholle, Elisabetha Dürrwächterin, Johann Eberhard Zundel, Juliana Zundelin, Penotus Zundel, Wilhelm Friedrich Zeller, Albrecht Ruff, Josef Bonnet, Katharina Bonnet, David Bonnet, Pierre Bonnet, Ludwig Epple, Margareta Epple, Barbara Leuplin, Margareta Bessanin, Magdalena Leuchten, David Hurlebaus, Johannes Langenbacher Junior, Jakob Langenbacher, Jakob Spengler, Maria Agnes Spenglerin, Margareta Wörlin, Christian Wörle, Magdalena Eiselin, Margareta Feiten, Christoph Knodel, Georg Kurz, Magdalena Schmüden, Johannes Reif, Martin Ditterle, Sebald Mee, Georg Pfleghammer, Peter Rosdan, Jakobina Knodelin, John Schnabel, Eva Regina Schnabelin, Susanna Säubertin, Johannes Eberle, Georg Schaal, Michael Plessing, Margaret Plessingen, Jakob Kurz, Maria Kurzen, David Krauter, Katharina Krauterin, Jakob Klingenstein, Justena Klingenstein, Jakob Pfeil, Margareta Pfeilen, Michael Plessing, Margareta Plessing, Jakob Torwart, Albert Knodel, Elisabeth Knodelin, Magdalena Torwart, Johannes Kurz, Barbara Kurzen, Tobias Silber, Georg Michael Scharnbacher, Margareta Scharbacherin, Johannes Späth, Romelius Langenbacher, Johann Friedrich Leuple, Katharina Leuplin, David Müller, Eugenius Müller, Margareta Schalin, Christina Rukenbrodin, Augustus Schmidt, Friedrich Wolfer, Elisabetha Wolfertin, Trambert Dürr, Friedrich Nachtrüb, Dorothea Nachtrieb, Georg Fruh, Daniel Lenz, Carolina Lenzen, Maria Frankin, Matthäus Kein, Christina Klein, Georg Kurz, Georg Felte, Philo Felte, Ludwig Schreiber, Elisabetha Schreiberin, Georg Mös, Philipp Becker, Elisabetha Hurlebausen, Sabina Beckren, Johann Trompeter, Friedrich Bühler, Matthäus Weidenbach, Christoph Bauer, Christina Bauerin, Johannes Stump, Johanna Stumpin, Maria Beutelin, Michael Beutel, Barbara Feuchten, Jakob Scheel, Lorenz Scheel, Johannes Hohn, Konrad Böhm, Rosina Böhm, Jakob Neff, Maria Neffin, Johannes Bauer, Elisabeth Bauerin, Christina Dürrwächterin, Michael Feucht, Christian Strohecker, Christoph Strohecker, Friedrich Kohler, Georg Früh, Dorothea Frühen, David Schäfer, Margareta Schäferin, Salomo Wolf, Elisabeth Barbara Wolfin, Jakob Stilz, Dorothea Stilzen, Eduard Stilz, Sabolon Weidenbach, Heinrich Hartmann, Katharina Hartmännen, Georg Wagner, Maria Wagnerin, Josef Kottrebar, Jakob Scheckburger, Josef Hörnle, Johannes Käser, Johannes Stahl, Sebastian Weihinger, Magdalena Weihingerin, Elisabetha Bauerin, Georg Bauer, Johannes Reichert, Johanna Reichertin, Jakob Weihinger, Christoph Weber, Adam Geier, Georg Konzelmann, Adam Nachtrüb, Georg Forstner, Maria Forstnerin, Georg Bentel, Margareta Bentel, Martin Rall, Philippina Rallin, Georg Benz, David Kant, Sabina Benzen, Peter Schreiber, Jakob Dengler, Luisa Denglerin, Friederika Götzen, Josef Götz, Christian Waldmann, Elisabeth Waldmann, Barbara Herrmann, Johannes Schmidt, Georg Kepler, Katharina Bonnet, Jakob Kreil, Katharina Keplerin, Georg Schmidt, Maria Schmiedin, Franz Bonet, Thomas Wörle, Katharina Wörlin, Leonhard Mahle, Johann David Ruff, Gregori Ruff, Dorothea Mahlen, Georg Rühle, Katharina Rühlen. Adam Jung, Katharina Jungen, Hilbertus Scholle, Georg Heinlein, Matthäus Klein, Friederika Heinlein, Christina Kleinen, Matthäus Speidel, Johannes Hermann, Friedrich Kurz, Christina Kurzen, Margareta Hermann, Georg Hermann, David König, Rosina Königin. Christiana Beiserin, Georg Beiser, Romanus Beiser, Basilius Beiser, Helmut Leuble, Angelius Weihinger, Jakob Schmidt, Johanna Schmidin, John Schreiber, Kaspar Torwart, Jakob Schäfer, Adam Geier, Johannes Bonnet, Michael Feucht.
Okay. We only lost one person during that.
That was very interesting.
Well, thank
All
you.
those German names and to hear them spell or hear them said correctly.
Right. Yeah, I thought that would be interesting to have them said the correct way. And I found out that I've been saying some of them wrong myself. But that's one reason why the person that that spoke all of the names didn't want to be remembered, because what if she got it wrong? But I think she did it a lot better than I would have. Yeah, there's a lot of those names that are written phonetically. So in the actual Articles of Agreement, there's a typescript copy of all the names, and that's like how we actually know who they were. There was some that they might be their nicknames, like in the beginning on the first page, I think it was, or second page, it was Bara Agnerin. And I think our speaker said Bata because she didn't see, but it's not a usual name. And there was another one, Shatar. That's not a usual name, but she probably couldn't spell Katerina. So it's just interesting, an interesting document. And I don't know if you could see all of the pencil marks by John Duss. That was actually also a court document. So there's writing from the courts in that document as well. So I know I zoomed up on the names so you wouldn't see everything. But it's a very interesting document. So is there any more comments or questions? I saw Kathy said, did I miss the Benson Hoffer family? I don't know. I don't know the answer. I don't remember that one in there, but it could have been misspelled. And I know there was a question about how many signatures. David, did you get that in your research?
I don't know how many.
I don't remember. I know it's in the document, but I wasn't paying attention to that. And Ken says, do you think the female names end in IN to indicate them as sisters, or since the Harmonist considered themselves as brothers and sisters, not husbands and wives? I don't know. You know, I have an article about that and I can't find it. So I wish I could find it, but it definitely says that's a female, but you notice there's not all of them have an IN on the end. And so I don't know. What were the criteria to sign? Over 21, but anything else? I know you noticed some people didn't sign. Like, this is supposedly 18, well, she would have been 8. There's some people you just see don't sign. And I don't know, maybe they weren't well at the time, or, you know, there's probably a variety of reasons why. I don't know. But you had to be ready for membership. And I don't know if you, David, did you cover it in 1827? They actually signed in companies. Did you?
I did mention that.
You did say that. So it was interesting because they seemed to divide them up according to who was a indenture, who was a good member, who was a possible member. Are there any other questions? Any other conversation? You can unmute if you want to.
Tell me again, at their height, they were what, about 800 members? Is that about right?
Yeah, we always say 800 or 900 people. It's hard to know. One of the things, because of this, the Articles of Agreement, they start on page 2 and they skip 10 pages in their numbering. And if you look in the book, you actually see some pages were cut out. And it makes you wonder how many were there. So that's why we always say 800 or 900 people. We just don't know for sure. But all told, there was around 1,700 people in total, but that was over the across the whole century. Any other questions or conversation? If not, I thank you very much for attending today, and we hope to see you this year. But thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you.
So have a good night.